Sarah, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you and to do this interview.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, when did you know that your career would be connected to the activism of the LGBTQ community?
Well, I was born an activist. I just think it's always in you. And a lot of my activism was centered around women's rights when I was growing up. And so when I finally came out, I just added LGBTQ. I mean, you can't really separate any activism, right? If it's, you know, an injustice for one is an injustice for all. So whether it's people of color, women, LGBTQ people, I think it's just in my blood, you know? But I started marching early.
It's part of you. That's amazing. Thank you. And for those who don't know about GLAAD and what your part is in GLAAD, could you tell us a little bit about it, please?
So I'm the president and CEO of GLAAD. I've been there about 4 years. Prior to that, I was in media, actually. I worked at magazines my early career. And so GLAAD is a media advocacy organization. Our role in the world is to change culture, change hearts and minds, introduce people to LGBTQ people, because we know that the number one way to change someone's heart or mind around LGBTQ people for the positive is by introducing them to someone. And so the biggest way that you can do that at scale is through TV shows and stories. And so we've been doing that for 32 years now. We were actually started as an organization during the AIDS crisis. So it's not lost on me that we're in another different crisis right now, but that we are an organization that shines best in crisis and making sure that the truth is being told. So our first protest as an organization was against the New York Post, who was demonizing gay men because of AIDS. Today, we are trying to correct the record, make sure that the truth is being told about the LGBTQ people and their contributions to society.
Now about Trump. So that's when we get there. So President Obama was clearly an ally of the LGBTQ community. Probably you agree. So he signed a federal law about hate crime. He signed it into law, appointing LGBTQ officials. That was a big thing too, and ambassadors, for example. What was the first thing that crossed your mind when you realized that Trump was going to be president of the United States and would be so much different from his previous ancestors?
Yeah. So President Obama and the movement and progressiveness that we saw under his leadership in 8 years was mind-blowing, quite frankly. Everything from marriage equality to, like you said, appointments in his cabinet and top official positions of openly gay or LGBTQ people. I think, you know, during the election in the United States, only 2% of coverage was LGBTQ of the entire election. And that 2% was usually positive around Donald Trump, that he is pro-LGBTQ, that he supports the community, when he wrapped himself in that LGBTQ pride flag. And so I knew better. Because his running mate, his first opportunity to show that he was supportive of the LGBTQ community, he chose a running mate that was so anti-LGBTQ. It's his rise to fame, Mike Pence. And so I knew immediately that that he would say one thing but do another. And then we saw it on Inauguration Day. I mean, the first move that he made in his administration was to erase us from the whitehouse.gov website on the day, within an hour of him being sworn in. And ever since, it's been erasing LGBTQ people from the 2020 census in America, from the National Survey of Older Americans, meaning that our older Americans in the United States, now they won't count LGBTQ people. Up until the trans-military ban, where he put a target on 15,000 service members who are actively serving our country, and said that he was banning them and kicking them out of the military for no good reason. We actually went in the market within 2 days of him issuing that ban via Twitter and asked Trump voting Americans, are they for or against the ban? And they were against the ban. Because Americans believe if you want to serve our country, if you're willing and able to serve our country, you should be allowed to serve our country.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter
who you are,
your gender identity, your sexual orientation, your color. If you want to put your life on the line for this country, for our country, people want you to have that opportunity. When Trump won, one of the things that we immediately installed was a Trump Accountability Project. It's called TAP. And what we do is, as he continues to appoint cabinet members, we look at their history on LGBTQ issues, on women's issues, on people of color issues, on immigrant, Muslim issues, and we post that. And that's really for journalists to have an easy access point, because like I said, the LGBTQ issues only was 2% of coverage during the election, and I wasn't, as a media advocacy organization, going to sit by and let that happen during this presidency. And so making sure we had a place to point journalists so that they could report on these people and the atrocities that they've done in the past. And so one of the more interesting ones was Mark Green, who was up for the U.S. Army Secretary position, who was replacing someone who was openly gay, and Eric Fanning. And we found audio tape of him actually saying that transgender people were evil, and he had to step away from that appointment. So we're on the front lines fighting every day to make sure that we're building awareness and education about this anti-LGBTQ administration.
Okay, I would like, if you can, specifically to talk about the transgender military ban.
Sure.
Because it was really shocking.
Yes.
And I would like to know how you feel, and the first thing that you said, I have to do this.
Right.
After you said that.
Well, I was on vacation, actually. It was like the first day of my vacation. But as I say, there's no vacation days in a Trump administration, because you don't know what's coming every day. And so that ban was shocking. The way we reacted and responded, well, first and foremost, I hit the airwaves and was on the major news outlets and in the major newspapers giving people context for this, that this was already, trans people have been serving our country for decades. We went through an exhaustive process about integrating them openly, and it was determined that it wouldn't be disruptive or cause any problems within the military. So this came with no foundation. There was no inciting incident. There was nothing that was going wrong. It was integration was being implemented, and it was going really smoothly. So this was just to attack someone. And so I wanted to make sure that this had context for people in America and across the world, honestly. And then what we did was, we decided what we do best is getting everyday people's real stories out there. And so the MTV Video Music Awards were coming up, and there's a big red carpet there. So we worked with them to get 6 trans military service members, 5 of them actively serving, to walk the red carpet and tell their stories. So I walked the red carpet with them. I think we had 431 million people viewed this story. And 2 days later, Mattis, who is the Secretary of the Army, said that he wasn't enforcing the ban. So I think knowing people who are trans, who are serving our country, is really, really important. And we wanted to make sure that we got them out there. And we have what we call the GLAAD Media Institute, where we help train people who have really interesting stories so that they can get in front of a camera and tell their story. So we trained them, we found them, we trained them, and then we got them on the red carpet. And I know they had, other than getting their story out, which was, and they're under attack, so being in a supportive environment, I know they had a really good time, because I got to see Pink and meet famous people. So
it's always fun too.
Yeah, so it was kind of nice.
Not just bad.
And they serve our country. I mean, they deserve it.
Of course they do. I do agree with that. And I do think also the reasons that they said for the travel ban, which was the medical expenses, and it's not even 1% of the costs. So
yeah, there was, the reason, the ban was implemented, the reason was thought of after. Yeah. You know, the ban was to attack an incredibly marginalized. So trans people are overrepresented in the military. One of the reasons that they're overrepresented in the military is because they have such a hard time getting a job. Right? They have trans people are one of the most have the most high unemployment rate in America. And so they see this as a good way of giving back and contributing to society and earning a living. Yeah. And so they're overrepresented. And so to target them in a place that they finally feel safe and that they're doing something good and they're earning a living is pretty nasty.
Yeah, it's really low. It's a really low blow.
It is low.
You were talking about the importance of the media and how distorted, stories can lead to disastrous results, and especially from Facebook, places like Facebook, and I think they had a big weight on the elections. They have a big weight now. So could you tell us a little bit more about the importance of the Trump Accountability Project?
Sure. Well, I think, another piece of GLAAD's work is really important here, which is, so we work in media, and one of the medias that we work in is social and digital media. And what we find is two things are happening in that space. Number one is that we're used as a wedge issue. So a lot of the ads that were run by Russia on Facebook were anti-LGBTQ ads, right? And so these weren't necessarily political ads, but social ads, which is different because in America, if you run a political ad, at least on television, and we're figuring this out obviously now in the wake of this election, it has to be known who is running that ad. But if you're running a social ad, you don't need to necessarily identify people. And so we have to look at this in a different way than we've looked at it in the past, when a foreign country can buy ads that raise social issues in our country and drive wedges between minority groups of people or people in our country. So there's one thing. Number two is that as we see, we're here at Web Summit talking about the rise of AI and the rise of automation within social media. So right now, if you log on to Twitter and you look and you search for the word bisexual, it's blocked, right? And so what's happening is that the people who are building the code are typically white, cis men who are straight. And so with that inherently is a bias. No, I don't, it's not necessarily, they don't even know they have a bias. It's just everybody views life through the lens that they live it, right? And so if you don't have women, if you don't have LGBTQ people, if you don't have people of color sitting at those coding tables, this bias is built in. And what happens is the machine is taught, go do this, and do it better and better, and incrementally improve yourself at a rapid rate. And so now we're seeing the results of that. One day on YouTube, 120 million pieces of LGBTQ content were taken down. And so we are very actively working with those companies, working with the media to shine a light on this, and trying to help rectify this before this train has left the station. But how far out of the station is it gone is what we're trying to figure out now with these companies. Also with AI, what we find is that there's a recent research study that came out of Stanford University that is, we were able to get put under ethical review, but what this research said was that by facial recognition, they could identify if you were gay or lesbian. And so where that draws a problem, there's a lot of issues with it. First, you know, the methodology and the way that they were able to determine it were off of social dating sites, which only a certain type of person might go to. And so you're only getting one sector of the L and the G community. More than half of the states in the United States, you can still be fired for being LGBTQ. In 72 countries in the world, it's criminal for being LGBTQ. In 8 of those countries, it's punishable by death. And so if you're saying that you can identify people now who are gay or lesbian, you can fire them from their jobs, you can put them in jail, you can kill them. And where is the ethics around AI, and who is building that out and taking that into consideration, especially for marginalized communities who don't have a voice or a seat at that table? And so I think those are really important issues that we're trying to raise and work with companies and AI creators to find solutions to, because AI can also do phenomenal things. Imagine if you got to learn what it's like to walk in the skin of someone who is a person of color or is gay or is a woman, and you could experience that life through their lens. So there are many great things that AI does, but the darker side of AI has to be addressed and handled ethically now, not in a year from now.
I saw an interesting piece on GLAAD on the website, which was called Southern Stories, and I really like the name, so I went to visit. Could you tell us a little bit about this project and the connection to the Pulse incident?
Yeah, so at GLAAD we do a survey every year. It's called Accelerating Acceptance Index, and because our job is to change culture, and how do you measure that? But we use a proxy called comfort. So how comfortable or uncomfortable are you with LGBTQ people in different scenarios, at schools, at picnics, at church? And then we can understand what the discomfort level in America is. We've actually used this to help activists in other countries measure this as well. What we found on our first survey was that discomfort levels rose by about 20% in the South, in the southern states of America. And so we created a program called Southern Stories, which was specifically about telling people stories of who are LGBTQ in the southern states of America. And so we actually got on a bus and went from small town to small town, and we continue that work in Nashville. This week is the Country Music Awards. Country music gets to every rural part of America. Rural America is where they know the least amount of LGBTQ people, so they can tend to be a little bit more biased towards LGBTQ people. So we've worked really closely this past October. Every October we have this big event called Spirit Day. It's international, and you wear purple in support of LGBTQ youth. And this year Faith Hill and Tim McGraw wore purple. And this was a big moment for country music, telling young LGBTQ people that they're with them, youth, that they're with them. And so our Southern work is never done, honestly, and we continue to work at changing hearts and minds in the South.
Probably it's the area that needs a little bit more attention.
Right, and so the Pulse shooting was obviously a tragic event, and really our biggest role in that was making sure that the people who were murdered, stories were told, but also making sure as the press covered it. I was down there within about 4 hours after it happened, or it was announced, and the news coverage started coming out. And one of the reasons I was there was because I had the media village set up, right? All the reporters, all the CNNs and NBCs flood to the place of a tragedy. And I went around to each of the reporters, not only did interviews, but made sure that they were talking specifically that this was an LGBT nightclub, that this was hateful against LGBTQ people, that there was intent walking in the doors of that particular bar on that particular night, because it was Latinx night too. And so this was targeting a specific group. And I think that that's really important, that was made aware of and shown to people.
Yeah, thank you. One about feminism, because I thought you would be the perfect person to answer this.
Sure.
Can you explain the importance of intersectional feminism and why it's so hard to happen still in 2017?
Right.
Because it's still hard to connect. And I would like to have your opinion about it.
Sure. Well, actually, this is all about our intersectionality. It's all about the fact that we have multiple identities, and all marginalized people need to really lock arms, especially in a time like now. You can't separate who you are. We are all diverse people. And I wake up every day as a woman. There's no stripping that away. And so I think it's really important that what makes you who you are, you use to fight for equality and acceptance for all. And so feminism is really important to me. Being a feminist is really important to me. And knowing, having grown up as a woman, knowing the uphill battles that I've had, the boardrooms that I've been left out of, the opportunities that I haven't had. I've always been someone who's paved my own way, and I'm a fighter, I'm an activist. So a closed door means to me I just have to knock harder, but not everyone's like that, and so I think it's really important for us who are like that to really fight for those who might feel voiceless or invisible.
So on a personal note, as a mom, what are the biggest misconceptions in the media that you think should be debunked about non-traditional families or considered non-traditional families?
It's so funny, that term non-traditional, right? I mean, I don't think traditional families really exist anymore. They're the minority, not the majority, in America, at least I can say. But, parents are parents. Our number one priority are our children, and making sure that they get access to everything that's the best that they can. Health, care, education, and that we raise them in a thriving environment, and that because their parents are gay, they don't feel discriminated against. And so for me, that was really, I think, one of the biggest reasons I came to GLAAD was, as a mom, as a gay mom, I wanted to make sure I created a world that my kids felt safe in. And so I felt that I needed to take bigger action around that, and running GLAAD has given me that unique opportunity and that privileged opportunity to fight to make the world better for our kids. And so, there is no difference. The only difference is they have two moms. Honestly, I mean, we worry about the same thing. I worry about, what kind of environment they're growing up in, the bullying. I worry about what they're going to be, how science and technology is overtaking their lives, and how are they going to exist. I have all the same worries as any other parent.
That's perfect. For new parents, and it doesn't matter what kind of a family, what do you think it's the most important message to pass to their offspring in terms of discrimination? What it's like the main thing for you to tell your kids, your children, about discrimination?
I think there's two things, right? I think one is that empathy is something that we lack in this country, and we don't put enough of, or in America, we don't put enough emphasis on learning to walk in someone else's shoes, trying to understand the world. We're so self-consumed that empathy is falling away. And then the other thing that I think is really important is service. We have to teach our kids to give back. That this world, that they have an opportunity, such an amazing opportunity to have an impact on the footprint of this world in a positive way, and raising them to think about how they're going to do that. Whether, my kids right now are really into endangered animals, so they save their money for that. We give the money away for that. We want to plan a trip to visit endangered animals, and building an awareness and consciousness around that is so important. So finding what it is that your kids care about and nurturing that part. We nurture everything else, right? We hold them to really high standards on education and what grades they get. We have no standard on service to others. And I think that's really important.
Transgenders suffer, as you said, horrific ordeals, and they're discriminated.
Yeah.
They have high rates of suicide. What do you think it's important for parents to say to a kid that is transgender? Because what I've seen is that some parents don't know how to deal with it. So what would be the first advice that you would give to a parent that is going through that?
Yeah. So I haven't personally gone through it, but in the parents that I've spoken to, I think you have to lead with love and let go of what your expectations were. When you become a new parent, you have all these expectations that you just dump on this poor baby, right? And so managing through that, I think, is really important, and understanding that this is bigger than you. This is your child, this isn't you controlling someone. This is about you giving them the opportunity to become whoever, to bloom into whoever they're going to be. And so leading with love and letting that be your main filter for your approach is going to only end in good for that child, because that child will feel loved and accepted.
And for GLAAD, what are the future plans of GLAAD? What's the surprises?
Well, we're very busy, right? We have religious exemption case being heard at the Supreme Court level in the early December. So we're getting around that, and we're going out with a campaign to journalists called Drop the F Word, because the opposition uses religious freedom. Freedom is built into our Constitution for religion. This is about religious exemptions. This is about making special privileges for religious people to discriminate against LGBTQ people. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the narrative correct around that. And then further to that, we have the midterm elections next year, which we're running a campaign about, vote for love, and really helping to shine a light on anti-LGBTQ candidates, and making sure that we're out there. Just this is education, where our goal is only about education, not endorsements. And so really educating the public around the anti-LGBTQ records of any of the candidates who are running. And then further than that, it's really about AI and technology, and how are we going to work to make sure that the biases that are already built in are being undone, and we're able to recode so that LGBTQ people, because one day if you're in a self-driving car and the biases have been built in and they continue, and you're walking down the street and there are two people that this car can hit, a white cisgender man or a gay person, this car might not even recognize you as a person if you're gay. And so there are real extreme cases of where this can head if it isn't handled right now. So that's really on the top of our list.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope all the plans and all in the future will be a little bit better.
Yes, thank you very much. It was great meeting you. Thank you for having me.